Morning guys, so today we're going to talk about the Irish Civil War. Alright, so to start off we need to think about what is a civil war. Have you heard of civil wars before? Why did they happen? So can we find any examples of civil wars? So some examples you may be aware of would be the American Civil War. So that happened due to issues around slavery and laws that were being passed in certain parts of America disagreeing about those laws. We may be aware of the English Civil War, which was to do with Oliver Cromwell overthrowing the royalty and monarchy due to what he's seen as corruption within the political system. You could be aware of Spanish Civil War, which was to do with General Franco taking over dictatorship within the country. What we're going to be looking at is obviously the Irish Civil War, and now this comes about due to issues to do with the treaty. So we've looked at the 1921 treaty. We know already that the politics of Ireland were very divided on the treaty. So we are going to be looking at what happened during the Civil War. First of all, what led to the Civil War, the other issues other than just the treaty. What happened during the Civil War, it was a very, very bloody violent fight, and it really divided the country right down the middle. And then we're going to be looking at some of the consequences. Why is this such an important part of Irish history for us to be aware of? So the main things to be aware of today is understanding the events that led to the Civil War, and they'll be able to explain some of the key moments from the Civil War itself. Okay, so we talked about the treaty debates before. At this stage we know that De Valera and his followers have now left the Dáil. Michael Collins and Arthur Griffith are now primarily responsible there because De Valera's left as head of government. It's these two gentlemen who take over in his place. Okay, particularly Griffith takes on the role of leader of President of the Executive Council, so I'm just fixing a misspelling there. And they are trying to set up a working government in this new Irish Free State. So it's a new country, needs a working government, there's a lot of work to be done, so these two men are really in charge of that. But political life in Ireland is very much split. So we said when the vote happened it was 67 to 54? No, 64 to 57, sorry. 64 pro-treaty and 57 against the treaty. So it's very, very close in its division. So political life is split into those who are pro-treaty, and these also might be referred to as Free Staters, the Free State government, and the anti-treaty, who are often referred to as the Republican side, because remember, they're not going for the Irish Free State, they still want a republic. And friends, families, everyone's divided on this issue. It splits families down the middle. Alright. Now, after the anti-treaty side left the Dáil, the IRA was also split. Okay, just remember, the Dáil is Sinn Féin, IRA is a separate body. But the IRA also split, and a number of anti-treaty, sorry, that was a mistake there again, lots of mistakes in there, sorry. Anti-treaty forces decided to take over the Four Courts in Dublin. So that's a famous building, there's a picture of it there at the bottom, with the green roof. The Four Courts, very large building on the quays, very important building on the quays in Dublin, and the anti-treaty forces took over this building. Now this is a big challenge to the pro-treaty government that's being set up, right? So it's very important. They're going to have to react to this in some way. So we could claim that once they took over the Four Courts, that a civil war was actually inevitable. But there's a few things going on at the same time. So the Free State government is being set up. Now they need to what they want to do is they hold a general election, and the reason to hold this general election is to give the people of Ireland a vote on the treaty. Let the people of Ireland speak about what they want. Okay? And it also allows them a bit of legitimacy, that when they're making decisions, they can say, actually no, the Irish people want this, they voted for us in the last election. So now there were some very complicated tactics in the actual election, and we're not going to go into detail of them here, but the main thing you need to know about is the Sinn Féin is divided into two sides. There's the pro-treaty Sinn Féin and there's the anti-treaty Sinn Féin. Pro-treaty Sinn Féin win 58 seats in the Dáil, so they are the biggest party in Parliament. Anti-treaty Sinn Féin, so still part of Sinn Féin party, but they're against the treaty. Okay, so all of this still the same party, just different ideas within the party. the anti-treaty Sinn Féiners win 36 seats in the Dáil. There are a few other parties at the time, so Labour, we know Labour has been about, as we know, we talked about that in 1916 with James Connolly. Labour wins 17 seats, so a substantial number of seats for Labour there. The Farmers Party wins 7 seats, and then Independents and another party, another small party, between them win 10 seats. Okay, so that's a total of 128 seats, with pro-treaty Sinn Féin being the largest party, anti-treaty Sinn Féin being the second largest party. But this also represents, if we break it down, all of those other parties, the Labour, the Farmers Party and the Independents, are all pro-treaty politicians. So in actuality what we have here is 92 members of Parliament being pro-treaty and only 36 being anti-treaty. So really what this election says is that the public of Ireland is very pro-treaty. The public has stated that a majority of them are pro this treaty being enacted, right, and only a much smaller portion are anti-treaty. And we need to be aware that less than a third of people who are elected are anti-treaty, but those anti-treaty Republicans do not accept the treaty under any conditions, and they believe that they've been elected, and they have indeed been elected, to support that view, so they're going to keep fighting against the treaty. And they are going to, one of the ways that they won't take the oath of allegiance, so they are sitting out of Dáil and they're acting in other ways to make an effect. So there's a number of things here that are going to lead to problems, and these are the causes of the civil war that does break out later on in the year. So the first cause, as we talked about, is disagreement over the treaty. The political landscape and the general public themselves are hugely divided on the terms of the treaty, should this be accepted or not. Now the majority are saying yes, and it is written into law, but there is still a large section who are against it. We have the general election and need to consolidate power. So the results of the election show a huge pro-treaty, clear victory for pro-treaty politics. And this government now has a duty to the people of Ireland to establish and run a working government. They need to have a government that's actually going to run the country and work for the country. So they have a lot of issues to deal with, and they can't be just ignoring the anti-treaty side if the anti-treaty side are causing trouble. We have a lot of British pressure. Okay, so Britain is putting pressure on Ireland. They need Ireland to have a working government. Now, an important leader, a retired British general, Henry Wilson, was assassinated in London around this time. The British blame the anti-treaty Sinn Féiners. Okay? That's who they believe has assassinated Henry Wilson. Now, essentially evidence shows that they weren't really involved in it. There is some speculation that perhaps actually the pro-treaty Sinn Féiners and Michael Collins were involved, but we're not going to go into that. Right? But the important thing we need to know is that Britain puts pressure on the Irish Free State, the new Free State government, to deal with these issues, to deal with these anti-treaty Sinn Féiners and get the problems and the violence in Ireland under control. And then finally we have 4 courts. So as we said, the Republican group have taken over the 4 courts. This is a clear challenge to the legitimacy of the government. So the government, they're saying to the government, we're not accepting you. And that's you can't have that really in a working state, and especially in a new country. You need to have people respecting the government and the decisions the government are made. You just challenge them, but you can't go taking over huge parts, different buildings, and having that kind of physical and violent reaction to a government. So the government needs to deal with this situation in order to be legitimate. So there's a number of causes there, and all of this is leading up to violence and war. Okay, and I remember we have Michael Collins and Arthur Griffith leading the Irish Free State, and they have been at war for a long time. They know how war runs, how war works, and as do a number of leaders on the on the Republican side, on the anti-treaty side. So if there is a war, there's going to be quite a bloody war, because there's a lot of shared knowledge on different sides of how war works. Alright, so basically what happens is the 4 courts is too big of an issue to be ignored. The government need to deal with this, and they import artillery and ammunition from Britain in order to deal with this. And basically they start to shell the 4 courts. They force these Republicans out of the 4 courts. Fighting spills over onto the streets, and they're fighting for a few days, but eventually they do take the 4 courts back. Now, fighting continues, and eventually after a short amount of time the Republicans, or the anti-treaty side, are forced to retreat into the Munster section of the country. So they're forced down to the southwest of the country, and they try to take an area which they called Munster Republic, and it is a line that stretches from Waterford over to Limerick. And they're trying to take this and control this area, because they know, they're a smaller section, they're probably not going to be able to stand up the force of the Free State government soldiers and the power of the army going on there. So they take over this this Munster Republic, but they're still not able to hold on to that. And the Free State government very quickly takes over the big cities and towns, so they take back Waterford and Limerick, and then they use boats to take back Cork City as well. This forces the anti-treaty forces to go into the countryside, and they begin using guerrilla warfare tactics. And this is tactics that Michael Collins was a big member of, obviously training them in, and it worked very well during the War of Independence, and they wanted to work again. The issue that they faced, though, is that in the Irish War of Independence they were fighting against the British, and the British didn't know the countryside, and that gave a huge advantage to the Irish fighters during the War of Independence. However, at this time they're fighting against fellow Irishmen, and these men are fighting against the Free State forces. They know the countryside, this is their country, this is Ireland, they've where they've grown up, and they know the places. So it's not the same effect of the guerrilla warfare, the use, because you're not fighting a stranger, you're fighting people who know the area that you're fighting in. During 1922, a number of things happened. So Arthur Griffith died of a brain hemorrhage. He passed away. 10 days later, Michael Collins was on a tour of Cork and was ambushed and assassinated. He was shot and killed by the anti-treaty forces at a place called Ballinablagh in County Cork. Obviously, he's a huge loss. He's it's considered one of the worst atrocities of the Civil War. This loss of this great man who had fought so hard for Irish freedom, and very soon after Ireland had achieved any kind of freedom, was killed not by the enemy but by fellow Irishmen. So it's definitely an issue that's gone down in Irish history. This still kind of drags at the Irish heartstrings. The film Michael Collins plays it out very well. They really portray the loss very significantly. The government then began executing anti-treaty forces, so they stepped up their fight against these anti-treaty forces and they executed prisoners. This included an important leader called Erskine Childers. Don't confuse him with Erskine Childers. His son was also named Erskine Childers and would later become President of Ireland. But this Erskine Childers, the father of the president, was executed by the Free State government because he was the leader of the anti-treaty forces. In retaliation, the IRA assassinated TD Sean Hales, and then because of that, the Free State government came back and executed more people, led to more assassinations, and it became a back and forth reprisal killings. Okay, so you kill one of ours, we kill one of yours, etc. Okay. This goes on up until April 1923, when a man named Liam Lynch. So Liam Lynch was the leader of the anti-treaty IRA, and he was killed in April 1923. Because of his death, he was replaced by Frank Aiken. And Frank Aiken, speaking with De Valera, the two of them decided that this was enough civil war. They called a ceasefire, and that's what brought the Civil War to an end. Alright, now that's a very, very quick run through of what the Civil War was. There's a lot more to it, and you can definitely look into more. What we really need to be aware of are the consequences. So consequences are, there's new political parties formed. So the pro-treaty side form a new political party called Cumann na Gael, and this would later become Fine Gael. Okay, so Cumann na Gael comes about. This is the pro-treaty side new party. A few years later, the anti-treaty side would leave Sinn Féin. A large section of the anti-treaty side would leave Sinn Féin, and they would form out their own new party under Eamon de Valera, and this is Fianna Fáil. So our two main political parties, still to this day, come from this pro-treaty and anti-treaty side. And that's where they originated, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Now, Sinn Féin and Labour continue to exist, but Sinn Féin never really, up until a very recent election, never really recovered from its numbers. Great leaders were lost, most famously Michael Collins. The divisions and bitterness between the groups in the country have lasted for decades. This is something that's been part of Irish history since. Still, if you speak to older generations, they will be very staunchly, most of them, on a pro-treaty or anti-treaty side. They have a very staunch opinion on this. The violence, and it's down to the violence and the lack of mercy shown on both sides. It's just such a bloody fight and so vicious in terms of how they attacked each other that it's not something that's easily forgotten. The death and destruction was estimated about 1,500 lives were lost due to the Civil War, and Dublin once again was destroyed. However, the democratic decision was upheld. The country voted for people who were supporting the treaty. The pro-treaty side came out victorious in this, and they had the government, and they, as victorious as anyone can be in the Civil War, but they set up a government and they led that government. Okay, so that is a quick run through of everything to do of the Civil War. Things you need to be aware of is it's an incredibly bloody, violent, vicious fight. Okay? There's a number of reasons. The number of reasons include the disagreement over the treaty, the election in 1922, four courts and the British pressure. A number of important leaders are lost, especially including Michael Collins, Ben Blah. And then it comes to a halt in 1923. New political parties are formed, which later became Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. You do need to know the difference between Cumann Gael and Fianna Gael. Okay, you can't call them Fine Gael until they actually become Fine Gael. They are Cumann Gael at this time. So if there's any other things, there's a bit of further reading here. Do read up on it a bit more and be aware of those kind of key points about the Irish Civil War.